The Aglet of Overton. I always liked odd jobs. I don't mean unwanted yard or household chores, snaking out a toilet, gutter cleaning. I mean the kind of jobs that people don't know exist. Like what I do now, which is bury people who don't have anyone to bury them, who die without friends or family. There are people who don't want funerals, who don't want to be buried in cemeteries, and who have their own ideas about what's to be done with them at the end. Usually they have money. Usually they're eccentric, want to be buried on islands or in their own backyards, or in hard-to-reach places, sometimes with unusual ceremonial aspects, like planting a tree or garden over their buried bodies. Have you ever heard of an aglet? That's the little tape piece that wraps around the end of a shoelace and gives it a tip. Most people don't know it has a name because there's no real reason to talk about it. My aglet shit the bed, has been said by very few people. If you say anything about your aglets, it's probably more like, the stupid little whatchamacallit on the end of my shoelace fell off. It's too insignificant to come up. It's not a word people hold on to, even if they learn it. So the word exists, but only people in the shoelace trade use it. And that is a trade, the shoelace trade. That's the kind of odd job I mean. I'm in the car and on the road and driving through some pretty country. Gray mountains on one side, yellow fields on the other. The car is a 1964 Volkswagen Beetlebug, crayon blue and almost perfectly restored by me. I'm driving up, as my wife Alice used to call it, but compass-wise it's north. I'm heading into the wilderness of Canada, or Canadia, as Alice would say, driving up to Canadia. The temperature drops 1 degree Fahrenheit every 30 miles, I've realized. I have a thermometer hanging from the mirror. I would have shared this fact with Alice if she were here, and she wouldn't have cared. And we would have gotten into a little fight over that, as I'd make a case for it being interesting, noteworthy. A case for me being interesting, noteworthy. Which, I suppose, I'm not. Unless that's the sort of thing you find interesting. Alice didn't leave me because I'm boring, and I didn't leave her because I thought she thought I was. I suppose I don't really know what happened. We moved a lot. Sometimes we were poor. Not always. For a few years I bought old VW bugs that had fallen on hard times, which is all of them. But I'd find a broken down bug, fix it up, and sell it. That's not so odd, but you might not think someone could make a living doing just that and nothing else. But I bugged, as Alice called it, for a few years, and we made a fortune. I probably bought and sold 30 bugs and kept the last one for myself. I've got tools and a mess of spare parts in the back, a clutch assembly, rebuilt starter, fuel filter, spark plugs and generator belts and things, a spare battery. The stuff most likely to go, which on a bug is pretty much everything. I almost have a full spare car in my car. That's the sort of thing I would have said to Alice. A little joke. She would have said, "Where are the fenders and doors?" She was pretty literal. I was pretty not literal. That could make for a kind of bone-on-bone contact between us. But having almost a full spare car and all my tools means I can fix the bug when it breaks, and it will, and keep going without much delay. In the trunk, which is in the front of a bug, you'll remember, the lawnmower engine is in the back, but in the front trunk is the body of a man named Dr. Carl Overton. He's in a black body bag straight from the cellar. Died of natural causes, as I understand it, heart attack. He was a doctor of some kind, a local GP, I suppose. Family doctor who didn't have a family, but still a pretty nice life. beautiful stone house on a hill with a so-called sparrow deck, which is the sort of deck that runs halfway around the house and fades in wing-like tapers. My dream house, in a vague sort of way. Really more Alice's dream house, but I came to like the idea. The doctor had some nice cars, which he kept in a garage that's bigger than my whole place. Never married, never had kids. Smoked a pipe. Left his money to the medical place he worked for. A substantial sum. I started doing a rough calculation, but I don't know how much the cars and house will fetch at auction. But I think I can safely say that Dr. Carl Overton left the medical place he worked for more money than they ever paid him in salary. Which rankles me, somehow. Like Carl worked his whole life for free, in a way, even paid a little for the privilege. I know all this stuff, the pipe and the beautiful house and cars, etc., because one of the things I had to do, as part of this particular odd job, was collect a few trinkets that Dr. Overton wanted to take with him on his journey to forever. So I had to wander through his house, find his bedroom, search through his mahogany drawers to locate an ancient wallet in a cigar box. Inside that stiff sheepskin square were some photos of his parents and himself as a boy. So I brought that along. Carl also wanted a $2 bill he'd kept since he was a kid. He'd framed it and hung it on the wall of his garage for some reason. Nostalgia, maybe. I found his mother's wedding ring and his father's watch in a letter tray in the front hall. He wanted those too. I sat on the steps of his sparrow porch and smoked one of his pipes. I always thought smoking a pipe might give me a little breather, a sense of easy street at the end of a long, hard day. Like I could unwind in the evenings and blow smoke at the clouds and relax. But smoking on the porch didn't do much for me. The smoke was pretty. I liked the fruit and flower smell, the slow, heavy thickness of the smoke. I swiped one of the pipes in a sleeve of tobacco. I'll probably give it another shot when I get to his cabin, or whatever it is. Maybe I'll bury the smoking gear with him, or just leave it in the cabin. At some point, I meant to wind the watch and strap it to the dead man's wrist. I don't mind. That's exactly the kind of thing I don't mind. Dr. Overton died without any living family. No wife or kids, as I said, but no brothers or sisters either, and no real friends. That's common. More common than you'd think. The whole world falls off you at the end, my father told me. Near his end. Anyway, there wasn't anybody to handle Dr. Overton's burial, especially the way he wanted it handled, and that's what the company I work for does. So I'm driving 900 miles to his little getaway house or cabin in the mountains to dig his grave in the cliffside yard of his shack, which overlooks a valley. Those were his wishes. That's what he wants. His final resting place near the old cabin getaway. No stone, no marker of any kind, no words spoken. He wants to be buried on the side of a mountain with his old wallet, with the photos and the $2 bill inside it, his mother's ring on his pinky finger, and his father's watch ticking away. In lieu of payment, I get to keep the shack. Consider it a tip, Dr. Overton's note read. Big tip, I said to Alice. She shrugged, didn't seem to hear me. She was crying a little, I don't know why. I had the sense she knew him, but I didn't want to press. It's an odd job and a weird business. Anything connected with death and dying has a substantial bit of strange built in. It's an extreme moment. Final wishes often match. Although the doctor's getaway is probably not the sort of place I'd hang on to, I'm sure I'll be able to sell it for a good bit. Maybe enough to quit this job for a while. But not before smoking the pipe up there, overlooking the valley, after I bury him. Maybe I'll hang out a few days if the bed's comfortable. Maybe even pretend I'll make use of the place as my own private getaway. But I won't. I wouldn't. There's a little itch inside me that just can't settle. I can't remember the last time I took a vacation. It doesn't even occur to me. It occurred to Alice all the time. The Eiffel Tower and buses through Greece, boats down the Nile. Apparently the roads get bad near the end, and the cabin can only be reached by hiking up a trail Dr. Overton made himself with his own 2 feet. His note said to me, "You'll be lucky to find my path." I have a good map, provided by Overton, and good directions, also provided by him. But my plan is to get as far as I can up the last of the bad roads, and then hike up alone to the cabin. If and when I find it, I'll hike back down and carry the good doctor up on my back. They have backpacks for such things, body carriers. I found one in the Army-Navy surplus. It's a military pack, I guess designed during one of the wars. Basically an extended metal-framed rucksack you can strap over your shoulders with all these clips and cords to wrap around a body. Dr. Overton weighs 160 pounds, same as me. That's a hell of a lot of weight to carry up a mountain. But if there's one thing I am, it's strong. Maybe not as strong as an ox or whatever, but strong as a donkey, maybe. You can load me down, and I'll keep on going. I don't have too many strengths, but strength is one of them. That's something even Alice would say. Still, it might take me a good long while to haul him up the 3-mile trail. Back home I did some practice to see if I could carry that much weight up the hill behind the house. Knee buckling and hurts, but I can manage. To drive around, as I am, with a dead body in the car, you have to have a special license. If you are actively conveying a body from one place to another, you have to affix an officially stamped slip on the side window as sealed by the county sheriff. Corpse on board is basically what it says. But there's also the name of the deceased and a death certificate number and information about me and my license and vehicle, and so on. They give you a pretty tight window of time to convey. They gave me 18 hours. I guess they don't want people driving around with dead bodies longer than they have to. It's part of the job, but the corpse on board document stuck to the window is where I seem to run into trouble. Aside from the digging, which is almost always harder than it should be. Cops pull me over all the time. Maybe because I drive such an unlikely vehicle for such work, but they also seem bored and curious. Or maybe bad guys make use of such things, kill someone, and then hide in plain sight with a forged permission slip taped to the window. I don't know. That seems a little fanciful to me, but who knows why anything is the way it is? That's something Alice liked to say when we'd come upon some daily small mystery. But being pulled over and vetted by bored cops can be time-consuming. And then people on the roads, other drivers as they pass, will often slow and draw close enough to get a squint at the official declaration taped to the glass. And I mean they get real close, skin to skin. This is not a document that's meant to be read from a passing car. So, I have to deal with that. It's a 14-hour drive in the Bug, which is a sub-speed limit kind of car. 900 miles, averaging 40 miles per hour, is how I figured it. Route this to route that, and then along an old turnpike to a series of forest roads, some semi-paved, most not, according to Dr. Overton. So far, everything has gone well. I've only been pulled over once, and only a few rubberneckers have tried to kiss my car with theirs. I'm in the quieter turnpike part of the journey now, and believe my cop and looky-loo problems are behind me. I like to drive with the windows down and things flapping around, with my arm on the door sill like a wing, and whatever AM radio station I can find spitting out dusty fanfare through the old Beetlebug speakers. Talk shows, old music, I don't care. I like the seaside company of unknown noises and voices, sort of exotic, sort of nostalgic, sort of apocalyptic. There's a pipe-smoking quality to it, I guess you could say. I find it restful. Alice did not. She liked the windows up, radio off. Though I love the beetlebug, I'm increasingly alone in that. People seem to have grown a kind of hatred for the little egg-shaped cars, which is why I had to stop restoring them. Something shifted in the world. Maybe it was the new electric cars coming out, something digital or computer-related. People lost their taste overnight, it seemed to me, for the quaint rattle and puff of these fragile gas and iron antiques. I couldn't sell the last one, so kept it, and started looking for my next odd job, which turned out to be this, burying bodies in curious places. One thing I can say for Alice, she loved the bugs too. I taught her how to use the shift, but she never wanted to drive, although she did always come along with me on my journeys to bury old so-and-so in the woods or whatever. Sat right beside me. In fact, I got so used to her being here that I'm a little stunned each time I turn and see she's not there. Feels like she's here when I'm not looking. Almost like she's driving, and I'm just sitting in the passenger seat with the wind blowing hard over my closed eyes as I imagine the mountains and fields passing us by. The gas smell has always been a problem for people. VW bugs smell like fuel in your lap, like you're sitting in the gas tank. Most bugs have holes in the floor, 'cause most of the bugs you see have rust problems to kingdom come. And because the floor is so postcard thin, so threadbare and rusted out, there's a tissue touch of the road beneath you, like you can feel the grind and grain of the road rubbing against the soles of your feet. Gives some folks the heebie-jeebies. But this is something Alice and I liked a lot. Made us think of walking, in a way. Driving a VW bug is like going barefoot through the grass, is something I used to say to her. And sometimes she'd say it to me. We agreed on a lot of things. I don't want to make it seem otherwise. There was a reason we stayed together as long as we did. Every bug owner will drive for a time with a hole, or many holes, in their floorboards through which they'll see the flicker of whatever passes beneath. For hangers-on like me and Alice, dedicated devotees of this perfectly amiable vehicle, the illusion persists, even after you patch all those holes, that you can still see the road flashing out beneath you. Bits of sand and grit, and even fragments of litter, gum, wrappers, and shopping lists seem to leap into the car from the outside world. I find all kinds of things on the floor after a long drive that don't belong to me. Bottle caps and wine corks and feathers and old pop balloons. Things just hop aboard and hitch a ride. But that's just it. There's a welcoming, open-hearted quality to the beetlebug, a best friend situation, and it provides restless souls like me and Alice, like I said, a needed, barefoot kind of walk in the grass experience. A way to feel okay in this not-so-okay world, a world full of small mysteries. Who knows why anything is the way it is? Not me, and not Alice. Maybe driving the bug with my arm out the window and the radio spitting dust is my version of smoking a pipe. A glimpse, at least, of easy street and a way to drive down it. It's a slow car, a weak car. You have to hold its hand as it holds on by a thread. But I love that delicacy. Feels human, I guess. Like it's the only car I've ever driven that reminds me of the human body. Fragile, but capable of having itself a real life, whatever that means. I see things when I drive in the bug. I'm there, connected. The world doesn't pour past like a sandstorm. I see what's around me and smell the land and feel the world brush by. I have little thoughts I share with Alice about this cow in a pasture, or that building with busted windows, or that tipping stand of faraway trees. It's conversational. It's a togetherness. Me and Alice and the whole world feeling our way along in mutual agreement. Boy, I could sell the hell out of a VW Bug and did. I rhapsodize like that with all my customers. She's not fast, she won't last, but she's real, and you'll feel real driving her, is something I'd say when I had someone on the hook. I pull into a 2-pump station on the side of the road and begin to glide across a beach of sand and dirt, which pops nicely as I slow. The 2-bit, a sign reads in big red letters on a flagpole. The station itself is ornate and forlorn, and the windows are plastered with peeling cigarette and beer ads for old-fashioned brands. Chesterfield cigarettes are mild in the mouth. The king of beers have a Coke and a smile. The pumps are antiques, red and white metal, rounded and posted like beer taps. If the attendant inside is friendly, I'll probably ask what this old building used to be. Post office? Train station? It has that kind of civic architecture, dense but flourished. I throw the latch of the pump and hesitate a moment before opening the front trunk where the gas fill is, a little worried that one of Dr. Overton's pale, dead hands might have slipped free of the bag. So I stand there a moment like I don't know who I am anymore or what's happened to me, like I'm standing there looking for Alice, wondering where she's gone and why. All of which is true, in a way, so I don't have to pretend too hard. But I don't have anything to worry about here. This is something I have to tell myself. I've covered the body with blankets and assorted junk and bug parts. A discriminating eye might detect a vaguely human form hidden in the mess, but I'm street legal and licensed. This is my job. This is my job, I almost say out loud, as I creak the bonnet open and insert the nozzle. I start the gas and wait. As the fuel begins to pump, I hear the shop bell tinkling and the shooish sound of someone coming out. "Full serve here, by the way," a young voice calls. An unsaid "Mr." hangs in the air. There's a boy smiling and coming toward me in a handshaking sort of way. He's wearing a set of greasy blue coveralls like he's been working under cars all morning. Carl is stitched in cursive blue letters across a pocket. His face is full boy, clean and smooth and semi-formed under a rough bowl of brown hair. I can picture him as a baby. "I'm fine," I say. "Or do you mean I can't pump my own?" "You can if you want, sir, but there's no discount. If I do it, I'll wash up your windows and check the oil." "That's okay," I say. "I'll do it myself." I'm a self-serve sort of person, and I got a body in a bag just inches from my hand. "You sure? I'd top off the oil and even add some windshield wiper fluid." "I could use some oil, probably," I say, "but these old bugs use the spare tire to pump the wiper fluid, and I don't have a spare at the moment. To fit the body in, I had to remove the tire." His hand reaches around mine, and before I know it, he's filling the tank, and I'm not. "You can shop around inside if you want. Good snacks and cold drinks, and we got a real clean restroom in the back." I look over Dr. Overton's body shape under the wires and blankets. "You know how to check and fill the oil on a car like this?" I ask him. "Yes, sir, all the time," he says. "All the time," I say. "Oh, we got someone in town with an old bug who's always driving around," he says. "I see him a couple times a week, so yeah." I don't know why, but some kind of old-fashioned mood has come over me, and I touch my fingers to the brim of my forehead, old movie style, before heading inside. I don't want anything, but head to the back of the store, past the pyramids of soup cans and cereal boxes, to see if the clean restroom prompts any unnoticed need. But I'm not hungry or thirsty, and my body feels completely, strangely empty. The store is neat as a pin, as quaint as a wooden button. An old black reporter fan spins out streamers from atop an antique Coca-Cola machine. Dewy glass bottles inside. I might grab one of those just for the novelty of using the old gadget. I seem to remember you had to yank the bottles pretty hard to snap them from their sleeve. There's the typical snacks, rows of cookies and sugar-topped breads, chip bags and candy bins. But along one side is a kind of miniature soda shop with fountain pools and a plate of glossy donuts under a glass cover and a few hot pies spinning in a mirrored case. It smells good in the two-bit. A whiff of every single thing for sale is what it's like. Newspapers and honeydew donuts, gas and leather and fresh-cut deli meats and powdered sugar and rising bread and pocket knives. Like I'm getting a glimpse, a taste, almost, of the old days. Like this is how an old general store in the country in the 1940s might have smelled. A little bit of everything on earth leaking slowly into the air. I look out the window and see Carl drawing my oil stick through a rag. There are a couple of fantail magazine stands near the door, one stuffed with comic books, one with maps. I give the Archies and Batmans a spin and then shift to the maps. On the top of the stand is a handwritten note that reads, Maps of Overton. The maps are all local, 10 to 15 different kinds. A map to Overton Quarry, an Overton hiking guide, the shops of Overton, Overton North Side, the lakes. I have, yes, made the connection of the town name to what I have in the trunk. But maybe he came from here, the doctor. Maybe his family was the first to settle here. Maybe all the Overtons are buried in Overton. Maybe this cliffside cabin grotto, as he called it, is the Overton family plot. Maybe I'm headed for an old mountain graveyard. All set, Carl says, as he steps through the tinkling door. A lot of maps for a little town, I say. It's actually pretty big, area-wise, Carl says. Funny I didn't see a sign for the town coming in, I say. It's up ahead a bit. They wanted to put it in a good spot. We got a nice lake, so they put it in front of that. Good for pictures, I guess. But we're in Overton now. Yep. Welcome to Overton. The boy smiles and takes up his position behind the counter and starts tugging away at the old slot machine cash register. It occurs to me that I used to work at a place like this when I was a kid. I approach with my wallet open as he calls out the price, which, for full serve, seems a lot lower than it should be. It's a little old-fashioned here, isn't it? I say. Got a local newspaper and everything, the boy says. He says, and everything, with a twist, as though to suggest local newspaper is all they have. Like having anything more would be less in a place like Overton. What they have is what they don't have. Is this a tourist town of some kind? I ask. A tourist town, he says, like he's never heard of such a thing. Are you old-fashioned on purpose here? Like it's 1942 in Overton and people come here to sort of let things go. Phones and computers and things. Read the newspaper and kick back and turn the world off. Heck no, he says. The opposite. The opposite, I say, but faintly. I'm wondering if I can rustle up what the opposite of a tourist town is on my own. This is Dr. Overton's town, the boy says. It's not even a town. It's just his land. Our land, I guess. I'm about to tell this kid I've got Dr. Overton, his Dr. Overton, presumably, in my car in a bag. But I'm sort of strung out in vague and uncertain ways. I'm not sure if I want to find out any more than I already know. Too much information, and I'll start to get curious. As Alice would tell you, that's when things start to slow down for me, grind to a halt. And I have a body to bury, a path to find, a hole to dig, a watch to wind. Is this Dr. Overton of yours a family doctor? I say. He's a little bit of everything, the boy says, which pushes me in the same nowhere direction as his description of Overton as the opposite of a tourist town. So, what's actually, I begin. But I don't know what words to use here or really what question I want to ask. What's the point of Overton? The gimmick? The secret? The angle? Why is it so old and strange like this? Then it occurs to me, what I really want to ask is, what's the Aglet of Overton? The little unnamed thing that no one talks about because they forgot the name for it. Because there's something Aglety going on here. Like the whatchamacallit on the tip of the Overton shoelace has started to peel off, and I'd like to find a way to talk about it with this kid. But he doesn't quite know what I'm talking about, because I don't have the word yet. The Aglet. It's how Dr. Overton wants it, Carl says. He grew up in a place like this, small town in the middle of nowhere. And I don't know when exactly, but maybe 30 or 40 years ago, he was up here driving around and he found this place. Overton? No, this place, the two-bit. Well, it was a train depot back then. We still got our train running, by the way. Tracks out back. I can sell you a ticket if you want, though it just goes through town. At that moment, I hear the whisk and whistle of the very train tucking its way through the strange little town that isn't a town. Who rides it then, if it just goes, I ask. Everyone does, he says. I take it home at the end of the day. Drops me right at my front door. The shop bell tinkles and an older man comes in. He's got a slick of white hair clicked into place over a tan forehead. Somehow his wrinkles have slipped together. Smooth tan patches of skin hang between dark lines. A black crease draws out from each eye, and a shadow folds at the base of his cheeks. But otherwise, he's old where he's old, and young everywhere else. The old guy has a fixed smile, like he wakes up smiling. As he gives me a look over, the smile brightens and trims. When he looks at Carl, high beams again, like he couldn't be happier. Beautiful afternoon out there, he says, in a word-by-word sort of way that suggests he likes the sound of his own voice. I was just out there, Dr. Overton, Carl says, as though to keep out of trouble. Believe I heard my favorite sound, Dr. Overton says. She's due any minute, the boy says, and pulls on a hanging roll of what I thought at first was a spool of lottery tickets. He rips a train ticket off, and Dr. Overton takes it and kisses it and heads through the bell-less back door of the two-bit. He's wearing a dark suit, white shirt, black tie, and as he passes me, I hear the whisper of his feet on the floor. He's barefoot. Look, I'm with you. I get it. Is this my Dr. Overton? I'm thinking that too, wondering if it's possible, and dismissing such notions just as quickly. Which series of on and offs puts me into something of a car accident limbo, bumped off the road, but haven't yet hit the tree. I'm thinking, is it? Could it be? And batting away such thoughts as quick as I can, like so many flies. Before exiting, the white-haired man makes the old-fashioned salute I made outside, and then says, It's a good and beautiful day to be alive, my friends, and on our way home. Though I've taken slightly against him for his regal and smiling ways, I give him the little two-fingered salute back, and Carl does too. I put coins in the Coke machine and wrestle a bottle out, struggle to pop the cap with my fingers before remembering there's always an opener built into these old standalones. I ply the bottle against the lip of the opener and hear the crack swish of success. I sip the cold drink and head outside with a mouthful of foam. My car sits like a sunning bird with its wings lifted to the light. Maybe this is how the other guy in town, another Dr. Overton probably, likes to have it done, so he can make sure all is well. Closing the rear trunk at the back, I see the oil dipper is rightly set in place, and up front I see the kid has successfully capped the gas fill and didn't spill any fuel, Tricky to do in a car like this. And I began to see that, yes, I would have dwelled on such things, the oil stick and the fuel cap. If the trunk and hood had been closed, I'd have driven off a mile or so and checked them both. I start the car and pull out, and right away I can feel it. There's an ease. The car is happier, its burden lifted. Something that was with me no longer is. I'll have to pull over and check the bag at some point, but I drive along the turnpike through trees and nothing much else until I come to the town sign set out before the long dark table of a lake. "Welcome to Overton, population 23, it reads. The wooden sign is mounted on a boulder set in a flower garden overflowing with orange mulch. I leave the car running and get out. There's a man in a rowboat coming across the lake with heartbeat strokes. I can only see the back of his head, but he looks to be around 40. Another Carl Overton, I think. I open the trunk and make a show of looking for something in the blankets, but I can already tell he's gone. The bag is there. In fact, it's been zipped back up for some reason. I unzip it and slide a hand inside just to be sure I'm not losing my mind. Then check my pockets for the wallet, ring, and watch. All there. But no body. Okay. Either 2-Bit Carl helped someone take the body out of the car, or 2-Bit Carl unzipped the bag and helped Dr. Overton climb out. Whereupon the old dead man took in the beauty of the day and then walked barefoot into the shop to buy a ticket to ride. Okay. Middle-aged Carl comes ashore. He's got some fresh flowers for the garden and some trowels and tools in a bag. Peonies, rudbeckia, columbine, the sort of hardy flowers Alice and I used to plant around town in our community-center days long ago. This guy's another sun worshiper. He's almost as orange as the mulch, and his neat plait of hair is 50-50, white to brown. Here comes middle-aged Dr. Carl Overton, I say to myself. The train whistles and whisks. It trots along on the silver tracks on the far side of the lake, black and yellow, a long-piped engine, and a single passenger car. Oddly toy-like and in no hurry, like maybe it never comes to a full stop, and all the Overtonians, all the Dr. Carl Overtons, have to hop on board and then hop off as it rolls on. I can't see anyone in the passenger windows, too far away. But as the train hews into the forest, it's already beginning a faint climb. It's not exactly a mountain looming over the valley, more like a pretty big hill with exposed rocky scrambles. And there, almost near the top, I see what looks like an opening of sorts. The hill, or mountain, is otherwise treeless, but in this upper glade on a cliff I see trees and somehow a sense of life and place. That's where I'm headed, I think. That's the doctor's grotto graveyard. So I guess I have to guess at this point that Dr. Carl Overton, my Dr. Carl Overton, is taking the train home. And I guess I also have to guess at this point that I'll have to meet him up there. I give the body bag a full pat-down and then close the hood and get back in the car. Middle-aged Carl is on his hands and knees, neck-deep in flowers, digging a hole in the mulch and the earth. I look at the sign again. Welcome to Overton, population 24, it now reads. 24. I guess middle-aged Carl brought a 4 with him, too, and has a 3 in his pocket now. Okay. Welcome back to Overton, Carl. I guess I finally guess that we'll have to see about that. I drive along, forest road to forest road, semi-paved to dirt, as per the instructions. I park in a blaze of meadow grass with a stretching belly of swamp leaking toward a river. I find the path, thin as a film strip starting up between 2 erratics, as Dr. Overton's note read. Big rocks left by glaciers, he explained. The hill is all tumbled stone and grassy slopes, like the whole mountain was left behind by a glacier. Digging a hole is never easy, but I always have hope. Not today. I've got my shovel and the body bag on the rucksack, and the watch, ring, wallet, and $2 bill in my pocket. I don't know what's going on, or what's gone wrong with the world or this place or me, but, as Alice says, who knows why anything is the way it is? The only thing I can think to do is finish what I'm here to do, and then get out of Overton as quickly as I can. My hole won't be deep, and that's fine. It doesn't need to be. I'll bury what's left. And it's not his hole anymore. It's mine. I'm picturing how few shovelfuls I can get away with before cramming everything down into the hole. 3, maybe, I'm thinking. 3 boot-struck spadings of earth. 3 lumpen piles, each the size of a human head. The thread of the trail thins and disappears now and then, but there are helpful cairns Dr. Overton has set out to mark the way. His way, or mine, or both. It's hard to say. But the leathery, foot-beaten earth has forgotten how to grow even wheatgrass. I hike along the rising zigzag strip until a rough cold wind corners a rocky bluff and nearly shoves me down. I turn and look behind me and see I've got some height. The valley lays out before me with its doll houses and the white needle of a church and green carpet lawns here and there and the long dark table of the lake. I can see the colored speckling of flowers near the welcome sign, but middle-aged Carl and the rowboat are gone. I scan the water top, but the lake is clean. I can't even spy a boat tied along its edges. The hill, mountain it's starting to feel like, is mostly long grasses and stones and doesn't look completely natural. Not spooky or anything, just like something happened here. There are forests and trees of all kinds on the lowlands of Overton and even on the distant hills, and I'm wondering about wildfires. A hill fire would explain this simple landscape, but there's no sign of blackened trees or smoldered stumps. Must be my imagination, then, picking up the curdle of an old dark smoke. I walk up the rise, straining now against the weight of the rucksack. Could I have carried him up? I'm not so sure now. If things hadn't gotten so strange, maybe. But strangeness weakens the body, takes the sap out of you. I'm not walking well. My balance is off, the wind almost knocking me down with every gust. I'm lightheaded. I've been thrown off a basic sense of my body and thrown from a clear way of thinking. I'm trying to picture how the doctor could have made this path alone, and why. If he used the getaway house, wouldn't he just take the strange train to and from? Why choose a long and difficult hike? Maybe he kept a car in the meadow and drove it into town. But why, when he had that train? It occurs to me then that maybe he made the trail, but maybe he made it for me. Dig a hole 3 spades deep, that's all you have to do, I think. 3 lumpen heads of soil piled beside it, and then on my knees neck deep in the flowers of burying. Shove the black bag down into the hole, set the wallet and the ring and the watch on top of that. I will do the job as best I can with what's left of it to do. I will wind that watch. Does it occur to me to bail on this odd job? I don't have a body to bury, so what's the point? I guess there's something in me hanging back and watching, something that wants to find out what the Aglet of Overton is. I'm mid-car crash, remember, off the road, but haven't yet hit the tree. This hike and this job both seem like that tree, foregone conclusions, fair and dark and unavoidable. I don't want to do it. I have to do it. I have to dig the hole and bury what's left. I have to be rid of what I've brought, and fairly so. If I do these hard, simple things and tire myself out and fulfill my obligation, then I'll be free, permitted, it occurs to me, to hike back down the mountain and get in the bug and leave this town full of Carl Overtons in a quiet state of mind. If I can do these things, I can forget these things. I remember years ago, it seems, but it was more like yesterday, waking in bed with Alice beside me. She was already up and listening to some kind of scratching noises in the cellar, a kind of low muttering of voices and shuffling activity 2 floors below us. "Someone's down there," she whispered. We listened. It was a careless, workmanlike sound, bored plumbers finding the pipes poorly installed and making a fuss over it. We lay corpse-like and frosty with listening, frightened as much by the sounds as by their commonplace quality. There were faint chuckles now and then, and tumblings of cans and hammer hits. Both of us wondered whether it was possible that one of us had arranged for this, hired some midnight fix-it men to come and do a little work in our cellar in the middle of the night. The worst part was that I could see what lay ahead, what needed doing. I had to get up and go down there. I had to check. Alice said things like, "We can sneak out the window," because our stairs down to the living room snapped like firecrackers. I got up. "What's happened? What's wrong? What are you doing?" she kept asking and pulling at my nightshirt. I pulled on my bathrobe, a birthday present from Alice, slipped on my slippers, also a gift from her. I hadn't worn either in forever, trying to ease myself, wrap a little normal around the strange, a little safety around the dangerous. Why we didn't crawl out the window and just run into the darkness, I don't know. We should have, maybe. As I crept down the firecracker stairs, I prepared myself. For what? For greater fear and terrible unknown things. For my own death, I guess. If that's what I thought lay in store for me, why go? Why would I go down there believing that something truly bad was about to happen? I don't know if I can answer that question, but this is something people do all the time. It's the tree again, that car accident feeling, fair and dark and unavoidable. I feel that way again here on the mountain path, like there's no way to avoid this, even though I could. Sometimes you have to see. Something inside you needs to know, even if that knowing proves to be the last thing you'll ever know. My guess was that it was a man from up the street, in our cellar. I found him laying on the floor, piling things up and chatting to his hands, fiddling old puzzle boxes open and setting the wrenches together and filling a pail with scrap wood. He'd taken off his clothes, which lay in strange piles, somehow already covered in dust, like he'd been down there many years. After Alice came down and talked to him, she told me that he used to live in our house. He used to play a game called Old Farmer in the cellar with his brother. I lay down beside him to lend him comfort and heard him listing all the little things in the cellar as his eyes lit around. I remembered Old Farmer was a naming game. You called out what you could see, being as specific and fancy as you could. I used to play it with my own brother. The trick of it was that you could go into an empty-seeming room and never stop playing. There are so many things, an astounding infinity of objects that you hardly registered until you really looked. But it was like the old dying man thought that as long as he could see and name what lay around him, he'd be okay. As long as he kept playing Old Farmer, he'd stay alive. "There's a tired wind and an old hole and a passive light in the cellar," he whispered. "There's a dead mouse by a cotton cap and an old hay broom fully swept. There are chains of clothes and powder piles and wire shapes on hooks. There's a stack of books on a wooden chair and a branching stick through its rails. As he played the game and named the things he saw in the fancy way that made the game fun, and his eyes roved around the cellar, I looked to find them too. There's a mail of leaves pushing through the slots and an earthen pail to catch the drops, he said. There are small close closets against the wall, like small old boats gone to sea. I believe he knew what he was saying and doing, and knew it wasn't right to go into someone's house in the middle of the night and strip naked and put wood in a bucket and lay down and play a game he once played here with his brother. But as I think of it now, I suppose he had to get back to the cellar of his old house for a final game of Old Farmer, didn't he? He was pulled to that memory and that game the way I'd been pulled down into the cellar to find him, the way I'm being pulled up the mountain now, the arriving tree, fair and dark and unavoidable. He died right there beside me, and the doctor, was it Dr. Overton, kneeled over him and closed his eyes, and Alice held his hands and told the doctor she knew there was a reason she'd learned how to drive the bug. Suddenly I was there, the top of the mountain shadowed over a grassy grotto laden with trees and boulders. Against the rising cliff and set before a small pond with an arching bridge was an old wooden house. It was simple, a child's drawing of a cabin, a fairy-tale square door with black latchings straddled by 2 windows that looked to be empty of glass. As a boy, I had drawn exactly this cabin in my notebooks at school, in the upper left corner of every page, even when they told me to stop. A round stone chimney rose over one side of the house with a thickness of smoke rising from it in milky webs and strands. This wasn't the standard mess of fireplace smoke, but the curling, creamy ghosts that climb from a pipe in a still room. There were no silver tracks running alongside the house, but the grotto was on its own sort of ledge, and as I walked along it to get a feel of the grass and soil, I kept glancing over the edge. On the far side, maybe 30 feet down, I saw the shining tracks crossing the southern escarpment. For some time I had had the awareness of someone watching me. Alice, maybe. But I assumed this was my own lightheadedness talking, that clearly drawn sense of being outside my body that I'd had in the cellar beside the old dying man. That car accident feeling again. The there, not there sensation I'd had as I went down our cellar stairs. I wondered if Dr. Overton had already arrived, was already home, was watching me instead of Alice through the glassless windows of the old wooden house. Maybe it was him or her, or maybe just me. I went up the cabin steps and knocked on the door and waited a moment before going in. I had a right to enter, to do whatever I pleased here. This land, after all, belonged to a dead man. This land belonged to me. As I realized this, a surge of something like victory passed through me. I turned at the door and regarded the thin trees in the stony grotto with a kind of possession. This is mine, I thought. I own this now. The small pond and the walking bridge arching over it, the thin trees with their open umbrella tops, the little lettuce garden I saw now beside the house, the ferns spreading like wings in the shadows of the larger boulders, the rocks mossed like ancient skulls with green toupees. The sun blinked on and off behind the summit stones as though dancing lightly on a string. As I looked now and shaded my eyes, I saw that the peak in fact resembled a hand made of stone, with granite fingers reaching up, as though the mountain was extending a raised arm greeting of hello to the world. The whole mountain was an arm waving hello. Or goodbye, I guess, if you were leaving. The cabin was a single room, a small bed on one wall, books stuffed in the shelves on either side of the fireplace. There was a flower rug, shadow-lit, and a single chair with a stack of books, with a stick running through its rails. There was a pail on the floor and an old witch's broom leaning against a wall that looked like it needed to be swept away itself. There were little baskets of wires on hooks, and in one corner was an old hole covered in web, dark and somehow looming, that seemed to puff and catch with a trapped breeze. There was no kitchen, no sink, oven, counter, but a series of leaning, rumpled bureaus or storage closets. Weedy shadows crossed the glass-speckled rug, and the wind sighed over the cliffs and whistled through the fingers of the stone summit. There were birds singing in the trees, and a steady salt shake of leaves. I hadn't heard these sounds before, and it was like my senses had been slowly rousing, as though the grotto and the cabin and the rocks and trees were still making their way toward me, and me toward all of them. I unclipped the belt of my rucksack and let it fall to the floor. I gathered the black bag and the shovel, touched my pockets to confirm the shapes of the wallet, watch, and ring, touched the other pocket to feel the sleeve of tobacco and little elbow of the pipe. I stood on the porch for a moment and simply looked around. The birds louder, the wind sharper, the colors of the grass and moss and ferns greener, clearer. I was looking in a new way here at the cabin, with a grandness of vision, absorbing and deepening, as though my eyes were breathing now, inhaling colors and shapes and whatever lay within the inside of things, as though I could stand here and look forever in this way at this clearing of grass and stone and log and moss and fern and pond and bridge, and never tire of breathing it in, because there was always more arriving and always more of me to feel it. Beholding, the word came to me. I was beholding. My other senses had begun to inhabit the world around me. For my entire life it seemed my ears had ignored almost every sound, except the forceful voices that barged upon my attention, or the trickle of sounds playing at the edges. I had never felt such a kissing and caressing of air against my face and skin. Even the way the wind shifted my hair and hang of my shirt felt an intimate touching. Beholding. I am fully beholding, I thought. As I walked toward the pond, I kicked off my shoes and dropped my pants and pulled off my shirt and let everything fall where it did before I slipped into the pond. I floated there, lay in the water, and then sank when I wanted to the depths. I held my breath at the bottom, which seemed to be bright with darkness, and felt the possibility that no breath need be taken again. This breathlessness could go on as long as I wanted. If I kept this cabin, if I lived here, I could come out to the pond and lay at its bottom and gaze up at the creasing sprinkle of the sun whenever I wished, and float to the surface and spin like a leaf for hours, days. But I still had a job to do. Let me just take care of that, and then we'll see about staying on, I thought. I climbed out and grabbed the pipe and tobacco and crossed the wooden bridge and walked upon the grass. The thrill and the shock I felt was not that I was naked, but that I hadn't spent my whole life like this. Why hadn't I gone naked through the world before? I should have come home and stripped my skin every day. Alice and I walking around together naked in the house and on the earth, driving down the highway, our bare feet upon the road. As though finally I'd arrived, was home at last, and here I was. After all these years, I'd finally come down from my place on high to the place on low I'd always been. I touched the stones and the soft moss tops. At some point the ground chilled beneath my feet in a way that told me that here was a good place to dig. I settled down on hands and knees and began to softly peel away the grassy folds, and then to dig out handfuls of the moist earth until a pile of dirt sat beside a hole with a lid of grass folded back like a blanket. The wallet and the ring and the watch and the black bag were all back with my piles of clothes beside the pool, almost infinitely far away. But I wouldn't mind the journey back at all. It was all I wanted to do, in fact. Cross the grass once more stand on the arching wooden bridge. I supposed it was likely that by the time I got back to my clothes to fetch the things, I'd forget my mission and end up back in the water again, sunk down in the breathless joys of that bottom, under the knifing of sunlight on the pond surface that I myself created, a light that cut and twinkled and called out the shape and signature of my own inclusion in the water. I lay down in the hole to check the feel of the earth and lit the pipe and watched the smoke fly off like white birds. What was that life I lived, anyway? I tried to recall. How had it really gone, and what sort of life had it been? What could you say of it? What name would it go by, if any? So small and unnoticed and tight for a while before it fell off, forgotten. I looked to see if I could see what it was and find its name, like the old man in our cellar had looked to see what it was. The aglet of my life is what I was looking for. And what was it? I had lain beside the naked old man in the cellar and played the game with him, calling out the things I could see and saying them in the fancy, old farmer way he'd said them. There are bits of glass that don't catch the light, like little carvings of the room, I said. There are napkin webs from every spindle, and ants and bracelets round the beams, and finger shadows from the window weeds, reaching out loud across the flower rug, the way the whispers of the man who lived here once had reached across it, before he went away and left behind his lack, like a tired wind in an old hole, which he left in the hole when he left. Alice tucked the wallet in beside me and slipped her ring upon my finger and strapped the watch around my wrist, where I could hear it ticking softly as she drew the blanket of grass across my body. I saw white birds of smoke rising toward the hand of the mountain and felt that hand coming round to hold me. Thinking of Stephen King.